The lunar base hummed with a quiet intensity that belied the storm brewing just beyond its quantum-shielded walls. Captain Marcus Chen moved between holographic displays, each projection a kaleidoscope of data streams that most humans, even most military personnel, would find incomprehensible. His dark eyes reflected the soft blue glow of quantum encryption matrices, tracking probabilities that shifted like living things. Nearby, Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood motionless, her augmented neural interface subtly pulsing at her temple. Unlike traditional military strategists, she was a hybrid, part linguist, part quantum psychologist, part strategic analyst. The team around her represented humanity's true weapon, not guns or ships, but an unprecedented convergence of human intelligence. "Incoming quantum signature," whispered Lieutenant Kira Yoshida, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface that seemed to breathe and pulse with living data. "Zornak long-range scout is transitioning through the hyperspatial corridor. Estimated arrival in 17 minutes. Marcus nodded, his hand moving almost imperceptibly. A series of quantum-locked defense protocols began to activate across Earth's orbital perimeter. They looked like ordinary communication satellites, bland, unremarkable objects that any casual observer would ignore. But each was a complex weapon, system that represented decades of covert preparation. The story of their preparation wasn't one of sudden militarization, but of patient, methodical evolution. After the first confirmed extraterrestrial communications in 2047, humanity hadn't responded with fear or aggression. Instead, they'd studied. Every intercepted alien communication, every fragment of technological data became a piece of an intricate puzzle. The Global Defense Initiative, a consortium that made previous international collaborations look like children's playground agreements, had been working in absolute secrecy. Governments, private corporations, independent research institutions all contributed to a single unified goal. They knew something that the Zornak could never understand. Humanity's greatest strength was its capacity to adapt, to learn, to transform potential extinction into opportunity. Preliminary scans confirmed Zornak battlecruiser configuration. Kira continued. Her voice was calm, almost clinical. Estimated weapon capacity suggests they believe this to be a standard conquest protocol. They have no idea. Marcus allowed himself a slight smile. The Zornak had been watching humanity for decades, believing they were studying a primitive species ripe for subjugation. What the aliens didn't know was that humanity had been studying them just as intently, and far more effectively. The lunar base itself was a testament to human innovation. Built into the moon's ancient regolith, it was more than a military installation. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of technology. Quantum computers that could process more information in a microsecond than previous generations could in a lifetime. Biological neural interfaces that blurred the line between human cognition and advanced computing. Adaptive weapon systems that could reconfigure themselves faster than an opponent could recognize a threat. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, her augmented eyes scanning multiple data streams simultaneously. Their approach vector suggests a standard territorial acquisition protocol, she noted. They're expecting minimal resistance, typical hierarchical conquest strategy. Her words carried a subtle undertone of professional contempt. The Zornak's military doctrine was rigid, predictable, a fatal flaw that humanity had methodically identified and was now preparing to exploit. "Quantum shields at maximum resonance," announced a technician. "Orbital defense matrix is fully synchronized." Marcus watched the incoming signature grow larger on the holographic display. To the untrained eye, it would look like a standard military approach. But every millimeter of space around that vessel was already mapped, analyzed, anticipated. The real weapon wasn't the technology, it was the collective human mind that had created it. Generations of scientists, engineers, strategists, each contributing a piece of a grand, intricate design, a design that the Zornak was about to discover in the most painful way possible. 13 minutes to contact, Kira reported. Marcus Chen's hand hovered over the final activation sequence. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for generations, And now, the galaxy would learn a fundamental truth. Earth was not a target. Earth was a predator, waiting to be underestimated. The silent hunt was about to begin. The communication chamber was a marvel of human engineering that looked deceptively simple. Smooth obsidian walls absorbed and redirected quantum frequencies, creating a space that was more than just a room. It was a living, breathing communication organism. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at its center, her neural interface humming with a soft, almost melodic frequency that seemed to vibrate just beyond human hearing. Around her, a team of linguists, psychologists, quantum mathematicians, and xenosemantic experts worked with a precision that bordered on the supernatural. Each member wore a specialized neural link, their collective consciousness forming a complex neural network that could deconstruct alien communication at speeds that would make traditional computing look like an abacus. Zornak primary communication. Frequency is stabilizing, announced Dr. Amir Khan, the team's lead quantum linguist. His fingers danced across a holographic interface that looked more like a living, breathing artwork than a communication system. We're capturing the full spectrum of their transmission. The Zornak's message was typical of their species, a blend of hierarchical demands and barely concealed contempt. They spoke of primitive species and mandatory integration, their language a complex mathematical protocol that most human communication systems would struggle to parse. But this team was different. Elena's neural interface began to break down the transmission at a molecular level. Each word, each syntactical structure was more than just language. It was a window into the Zornak psychological infrastructure. Their communication wasn't just a means of conveying information. It was a weapon, a tool of psychological domination that had subjugated countless species across the galaxy. But humanity had been studying them for decades. Linguistic matrix is stabilized, Dr. Khan reported. We're ready to begin primary deconstruction. The AI response they were preparing wasn't a traditional diplomatic message. It was a carefully crafted psychological weapon designed to penetrate the very core of the Zornak communication protocol. Every word, every syntactical structure was mathematically constructed to trigger specific neurological responses. Dr. Rodriguez closed her eyes, her augmented consciousness interfacing directly with the communication matrix. To an outside observer, she might have looked like she was meditating. In reality, she was conducting a symphony of language, mathematics, and psychological warfare. The team had spent years studying the Zornak's previous conquests. They'd analyzed communication logs from dozens of species that had encountered the alien civilization. Each transmission was a puzzle piece revealing not just linguistic patterns but deep-seated psychological vulnerabilities. The Zornak believed in a hierarchical communication model that assumed absolute submission. Their language was structured around the concept of dominant frequencies, mathematical protocols that embedded psychological control into every transmission. They didn't just communicate, they dominated. But humanity had found the cracks in their system. Quantum resonance at maximum, whispered a technician. The walls of the communication chamber seemed to pulse with an energy that was neither sound nor light, but something in between. Elena's voice, when it emerged, was unlike anything the Zornak had ever encountered. It was a transmission that defied their understanding of communication, a message that was simultaneously a diplomatic response, a psychological probe, and a warning. Each word was a weapon. Each syntactical structure a trap. The transmission began with mathematical precision, using the Zornak's own communication protocols against them. It acknowledged their message, but in a way that subtly destabilized their entire communication infrastructure. Mathematical sequences that seemed to comply with their protocols actually introduced cascading uncertainty into their neural networks. Transmission, locked and ready, Dr. Khan announced. The message was elegant in its complexity. To a human, it would sound like a diplomatic communication. To the Zornak, it would be a cascading system failure that introduced fundamental doubts into their hierarchical understanding of communication and conquest. Strike again, the transmission concluded, "and you'll face annihilation." But those words were more than a simple threat. They were a mathematically constructed virus that would propagate through the Zornak's communication networks, introducing fundamental uncertainties that would undermine their entire strategic approach. In the communication chamber, Dr. Rodriguez allowed herself the slightest smile. The first move was complete. The psychological warfare had begun. The orbital defense grid was alive, not alive in the way biological entities understood life, but alive in a way that would terrify any traditional conception of sentience. Thousands of satellites that appeared to be nothing more than routine communication relays were, in reality, the most sophisticated weapon system ever conceived by any known civilization. Dr. Akira Nakamura watched from the primary control center, her cybernetic eye tracking quantum-entangled data streams that flowed like liquid thought. Each satellite was more than a simple defensive instrument. It was a node in a vast, living neural network that could think, adapt, and respond faster than any biological intelligence could comprehend. "Incoming weapon signatures detected," announced Lieutenant Carlos Rodriguez, his voice calm despite the impending assault. "Zornak battlecruiser charging primary plasma cannons. Estimated time to first strike, 2 minutes, 17 seconds. The satellites began to move, not with the rigid, predictable motions of traditional military hardware, but with a fluidity that suggested something closer to a living organism. Quantum-entangled communication nodes shifted imperceptibly, creating interference patterns that would make the incoming attack impossible to predict or counter. Humanity's defense grid was the product of decades of research that combined multiple scientific disciplines. Quantum physics, neural network theory, adaptive algorithms, and biomimetic engineering had converged to create something unprecedented. Each satellite was a complex ecosystem of technological innovation, capable of real-time learning and adaptation. Initiating primary quantum resonance, Dr. Nakamura commanded. The satellites began to pulse with a frequency that existed just beyond traditional electromagnetic spectrums. To the Zornak sensors, they would appear to be nothing more than standard communication relays. The true nature of their capabilities was hidden behind layers of technological camouflage that would only reveal themselves at the moment of maximum impact. Beneath the orbital grid, massive particle accelerators buried deep within Earth's crust began to spin up. These were not mere research instruments, but the beating heart of humanity's most advanced defensive capabilities. Each pulse generated could create localized quantum fluctuations capable of destabilizing matter at its most fundamental level. Lieutenant Rodriguez watched the incoming Zornak weapon signatures with a professional detachment that masked an intricate understanding of the technological ballet about to unfold. The alien battlecruiser was approaching with what they believed was an overwhelming technological advantage. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Quantum interference matrices are at 98% synchronization," a technician reported. The defense grid was more than a weapon system. It was a living, breathing mathematical symphony that could deconstruct and reconstruct its own capabilities faster than an opponent could recognize a threat. Each satellite communicated through quantum-entangled networks that made traditional communication look like primitive Morse code. Dr. Nakamura's cybernetic eye tracked multiple data streams simultaneously. To an outside observer, she might have looked like she was merely watching a complex display. In reality, she was conducting an intricate technological orchestra that would fundamentally redefine the concept of planetary defense. "First plasma volley approaching," Carlos announced. The satellites didn't just block the incoming attack. They began to analyze it, deconstruct it, understand it at a molecular level. Adaptive algorithms began to generate counterfrequencies that would not just deflect the weapons but systematically dismantle their fundamental structural integrity. Humanity had spent decades preparing for this moment. Every intercepted alien communication, every fragment of technological data had been meticulously studied, analyzed, and integrated into a defensive system that was more than the sum of its parts. The first plasma bolt approached the orbital grid, and then something extraordinary happened. The satellites didn't just stop the weapon. They began to rewrite its fundamental quantum signature. What should have been a devastating attack began to dissolve, its energy redirected and transformed into something completely unrecognizable. Weapon neutralization complete, Carlos reported, a hint of professional pride in his voice. Dr. Nakamura allowed herself the slightest smile. The Zornak believed they were launching an attack. In reality, they had just become unwitting participants in the most sophisticated technological analysis humanity could construct. Each moment of the engagement was being processed, analyzed, integrated into the defensive grid's adaptive algorithms. The satellites were learning, evolving, creating counter-strategies faster than biological minds could comprehend. The technological symphony was just beginning, and the Zornak had no idea what was coming. Deep beneath the Andes Mountains, the Contingency Control Center was more than a military installation. It was humanity's ultimate insurance policy, a technological marvel that redefined the concept of defensive preparedness. Dr. Aisha Nakamura moved through the facility like a conductor, preparing for an impossible symphony. Massive quantum computers lined the walls, their cooling systems creating a soft, rhythmic background hum that seemed to pulse with living intelligence. Each system was a node in a global network so complex that traditional concepts of computation became meaningless. Zornak ship's primary systems are beginning to destabilize, announced Lieutenant Kai Chen, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe and shift with each touch. Nanoswarm deployment in 3 minutes 17 seconds. The nanoswarm was humanity's most closely guarded technological secret. Not weapons in any traditional sense. These were living technological constructs that existed in a liminal space between matter and information. Billions of microscopic machines, each one a complex computational system, capable of independent decision-making, adaptive learning, and molecular-level reconstruction. Dr. Nakamura's augmented eyes tracked multiple data streams simultaneously. To an outside observer, she might have looked like she was merely watching a complex display. In reality, she was managing a technological ecosystem that could fundamentally rewrite the rules of engagement. Initiating primary infiltration protocols, Kai reported. The first wave of nanoswarms began to deploy. They weren't launched like traditional weapons. They phased into existence, quantum tunneling through the most microscopic vulnerabilities in the Zornak ship's defensive systems. Each nanomachine was a marvel of engineering, part computer, part biological construct, part adaptive algorithm. Humanity's preparation had been decades in the making. After the first confirmed extraterrestrial communications in 2047, they hadn't responded with fear or aggression. Instead, they'd studied. Every intercepted alien communication, every fragment of technological data became a piece of an intricate puzzle. The Global Defense Initiative, a consortium that made previous international collaborations look like children's playground agreements, had been working in absolute secrecy. Governments, private corporations, independent research institutions all contributed to a single unified goal. Inside the Zornak ship, the nanoswarms began their work. They didn't attack in any traditional sense. Instead, they began to map, analyze, and systematically deconstruct the ship's technological infrastructure. Defensive systems found themselves gradually reprogrammed. Critical systems began to receive conflicting instructions that appeared to come from their own internal command structures. Nanoswarm penetration at 67%, Kai announced. They're beginning comprehensive system analysis. Each nanomachine was a marvel of adaptive technology. They communicated through quantum-entangled networks, sharing information and adapting their strategies faster than any biological intelligence could comprehend. Where traditional weapons sought to destroy, these technological constructs sought to understand, to infiltrate, to fundamentally rewrite. Dr. Nakamura watched as holographic displays showed the gradual deconstruction of the Zornak ship's systems. It wasn't destruction, it was a complete technological dissection. Every line of code, every quantum frequency, every microscopic system was being analyzed, understood, and ultimately controlled. We're receiving their entire technological database, a data analyst reported. Quantum encryption is breaking down faster than their systems can respond. The true weapon wasn't the technology itself. It was the collective human mind that had created it. Generations of scientists, engineers, strategists, each contributing a piece of a grand, intricate design. A design that the Zornak was about to discover in the most painful way possible. The nanoswarms began to do something unprecedented. They weren't just infiltrating the ship's systems, they were learning from them. Adaptive algorithms began to integrate alien technological concepts, creating hybrid systems that existed beyond the comprehension of their original designers. Complete system infiltration in progress, Kai reported. His voice carried a note of professional pride that bordered on reverence. By the time the Zornak realized what was happening, it would be too late. Their most secure systems were being rewritten from the inside out. Defensive protocols became vulnerabilities. Communication networks became invasive analysis tools. Dr. Nakamura allowed herself the slightest smile. The first move was complete. The OTC, adaptive contingency, had begun, and the Zornak had no idea what was coming next. The Galactic Communication Hub was a marvel of multi-species engineering, a massive orbital station that served as the primary nexus for interstellar information exchange. Thousands of communication arrays from hundreds of different civilizations intersected at this singular point, creating a vast network that spanned multiple star systems. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the primary transmission control center, her neural interface humming with a complexity that would make most communication experts weep. Around her, a team of experts from multiple disciplines watched with a mixture of anticipation and professional calculation. Transmission protocols are locked, announced Dr. Amir Khan, the lead quantum communication specialist. We're preparing to broadcast on all known frequency bands, including several the Zornak didn't know we could access. What was about to happen was more than just a communication. It was a carefully orchestrated psychological and technological demonstration that would fundamentally reshape how the galaxy understood humanity. The broadcast wasn't simply a recording of the Zornak defeat. It was a meticulously constructed message that combined multiple layers of information. Technical specifications, tactical analysis, psychological profiles, all woven together with a precision that bordered on artistic complexity. Initiating primary transmission, Kai Chen reported. The first wave of the broadcast began to propagate across multiple communication spectrums. To most species, it would appear to be a standard military engagement report. But each layer contained depths that would take years, perhaps decades, to fully comprehend. The video showed the Zornak battlecruiser's systematic deconstruction. But it wasn't just a simple recording. Each frame was a quantum-encoded information packet that could be decoded at multiple levels. Technical analysts would find detailed schematics of the alien vessel's technological vulnerabilities. Linguistic experts would discover subtle communication analysis. Psychological researchers would uncover intricate behavioral patterns. Dr. Rodriguez's neural interface allowed her to monitor the transmission's propagation in real time. She could see how it branched, how it adapted, how it penetrated communication networks across multiple star systems. Transmission is achieving exponential distribution, Dr. Khan noted, a hint of professional excitement in his voice. We're seeing unprecedented penetration rates across known galactic communication networks. This was more than a military report. It was a declaration. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was demonstrating a level of technological and strategic sophistication that would fundamentally challenge existing galactic power structures. The broadcast contained multiple layers of information. Technical specifications of the nanoswarm technology, quantum encrypted analysis of Zornak communication protocols, detailed breakdown of the defensive strategies employed, psychological profiles of the alien civilization's decision-making processes. Each layer was a weapon in its own right. Not a weapon of destruction, but a weapon of understanding. A precise, calculated demonstration of humanity's capabilities. We're receiving initial response signals, a communication analyst reported. Multiple species are attempting to decrypt the transmission. The reactions would be fascinating. Some would be terrified, some would be intrigued. Some would recognize it for what it was, a sophisticated warning and invitation. Dr. Rodriguez allowed herself a slight smile. The message was clear. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated. They were not a potential conquest. They were a civilization that could turn an attempted invasion into a comprehensive technological and psychological analysis. Transmission complete, Kai announced. But it was more than a transmission. It was a statement, a warning, an invitation. The first waves of the broadcast began to reach the outer communication networks. Alien civilizations would spend years, perhaps decades, attempting to fully comprehend the multiple layers of information contained within those quantum-encoded signals. In communication centers across multiple star systems, experts would gather. They would analyze. They would debate. They would try to understand the message that humanity had just sent to the galaxy. The true complexity of the broadcast would become apparent only with time. Each viewing would reveal new layers, new insights, new understanding of the species that had just demonstrated its technological and strategic capabilities. Humanity had just changed the galactic conversation, and they were just getting started. The Strategic Quantum Projection Center was a testament to humanity's most advanced technological capabilities. Buried deep beneath the Siberian tundra, it was a facility that defied traditional concepts of military infrastructure. Massive quantum computers lined walls that seemed to pulse with a living intelligence, their cooling systems creating a soft, rhythmic background hum that suggested something far more complex than mere machinery. Captain Marcus Chen stood at the center of a holographic projection that mapped potential space-time trajectories across multiple dimensions. Each line represented a potential path of the Zornak fleet, not just their current movement but every possible vector of retreat, counterattack, or strategic repositioning. Tracking multiple fleet signatures, Lieutenant Kira Yoshida announced, her augmented fingers dancing across quantum-entangled interfaces. The Zornak are attempting to scatter their remaining vessels across multiple hyperspatial corridors, but they didn't understand the true nature of what they were facing. The retaliatory algorithm was more than a weapon system. It was a living, adaptive mathematical construct that could predict and counter potential threats across dimensionality that most species couldn't even comprehend. Each potential trajectory was analyzed, deconstructed, and mapped with a precision that bordered on prescience. Quantum lock on primary fleet vectors initiated, Marcus commanded. Beneath the facility, massive particle accelerators began to spin, up. These were not mere research instruments, but the beating heart of humanity's most advanced offensive capabilities. Each pulse could generate localized quantum fluctuations, capable of creating targeted disruptions in space-time itself. The antimatter missiles were unlike anything in known galactic warfare. Quantum-locked and dimensionally adaptive, they weren't simply weapons. They were precise surgical instruments capable of creating localized space-time disruptions that could theoretically erase entire star systems from existence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez moved between holographic displays, her neural interface processing multiple streams of data simultaneously. To an outside observer, she might have looked like she was merely watching a complex system. In reality, she was conducting a symphony of mathematical destruction that would redefine the concept of strategic retaliation. First wave of quantum-locked missiles preparing for deployment, Kira reported. The missiles didn't launch in any traditional sense. They phased into existence, quantum tunneling through the most microscopic vulnerabilities in space-time itself. Each missile was a complex ecosystem of computational power, part weapon, part analysis tool, part adaptive intelligence. Tracking shows the Zornak are attempting to use experimental hyperspace jump protocols, Marcus observed. His voice carried the calm precision of someone who had already calculated every possible outcome. The retaliatory algorithm began to work its true magic. It wasn't just tracking the fleet. It was predicting their movements with such precision that it could place antimatter missiles at exact points in their potential escape routes. Not just where they were, but where they would be, could be, might be. Quantum mechanics became a weapon of unprecedented sophistication. Missile trajectories locked, Kira announced. Probability of complete fleet neutralization, 99.987%. First antimatter missiles began to phase into existence along the Zornak fleet's potential escape vectors. They weren't simply positioned, they were mathematically woven into the fabric of space-time itself. Each missile carried not just destructive capability, but comprehensive analysis tools that would map and understand the fundamental structure of the targets. Dr. Rodriguez watched the holographic displays with a mixture of professional calculation and scientific wonder. This was more than retaliation. This was a comprehensive demonstration of humanity's technological capabilities. Initiating primary quantum resonance, Marcus commanded. The missiles didn't just destroy, they analyzed, they understood. They became living repositories of information about the targets, collecting data at a molecular, even quantum level. Each detonation would be a comprehensive scientific analysis, as much as a military strike. Targets are entering kill zones, Kira reported. The first antimatter missiles began to interact with the Zornak fleet's hyperspatial corridors. The results were beyond traditional concepts of weaponry. Space itself seemed to fold, to twist, to become something fluid and malleable. Entire sections of space began to destabilize. The Zornak fleet was about to learn a fundamental truth about humanity. We do not simply defend. We annihilate. With scientific precision, the interstellar diplomatic nexus was unlike any conference center in galactic history. Suspended in orbit around a carefully selected neutral planet, the facility was a marvel of multi-species architectural design. Its walls shifted with adaptive membranes that could simultaneously translate, analyze, and communicate across dozens of different biological and technological communication spectrums. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the primary negotiation chamber, her presence a carefully calculated demonstration of humanity's approach to diplomatic engagement. She wasn't just a diplomat, she was a living embodiment of humanity's most advanced capabilities. Her neural interface pulsed with a soft, almost imperceptible rhythm. Augmented eyes that could process visual information across spectrums far beyond biological limitations scanned the assembled delegates. Representatives from over 147 different galactic civilizations watched her with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and professional calculation. "The data package has been transmitted," whispered Dr. Amir Khan, her primary communication specialist. "Preliminary analysis shows unprecedented levels of engagement across diplomatic networks." The presentation wasn't a traditional diplomatic report. It was a comprehensive demonstration of humanity's technological, psychological, and strategic capabilities. Every word, every image, every technical specification was a carefully constructed mathematical equation that served multiple purposes simultaneously. Part scientific demonstration, part psychological profile, part strategic warning. The holographic displays began to unfold. They showed not just the defeat of the Zornak, but a comprehensive breakdown of the technological and strategic processes that made such a victory possible. Technical specifications danced alongside psychological analyses. Quantum computational models intertwined with cultural insights. "We do not seek conquest," Elena began, her voice translated and modulated across multiple communication spectrums. "We seek understanding." But those words carried multiple layers of meaning. Each syllable was a carefully constructed communication protocol that would be analyzed by diplomatic experts for decades to come. The data package contained complete technical specifications of the defensive technologies used, psychological profiles of the Zornak decision-making processes, mathematical models demonstrating the potential consequences of aggressive action, a comprehensive breakdown of humanity's technological capabilities, detailed historical analyses of human adaptability and strategic thinking. To most species, it would appear to be a diplomatic presentation. To those capable of deeper analysis, it was a sophisticated warning and an equally sophisticated invitation. "We have demonstrated our capabilities," Elena continued, "not as a threat, but as a statement of our potential for collaboration, or conflict." The diplomatic chamber was silent. Representatives from species that had been conquered by the Zornak listened with a mixture of hope and professional calculation. Those who had feared humanity now saw something different. Not a potential conqueror, but a complex civilization offering a fundamentally different approach to galactic interaction. Dr. Khan's communication analysis began to provide real-time feedback. Diplomatic networks were lighting up with unprecedented levels of analysis and discussion. The presentation was being dissected, translated, interpreted across multiple levels of technological and cultural understanding. Diplomatic engagement protocols are showing extraordinary levels of complexity, he reported softly. Elena's presentation was a masterpiece of multi-dimensional communication. It wasn't just presenting information. It was creating a comprehensive, mathematical equation that demonstrated humanity's approach to galactic interaction, not conquest, not submission, collaboration, on humanity's terms. The holographic displays began to show potential collaborative scenarios, scientific research projects that could only be achieved through multi-species cooperation, technological innovations that could benefit entire galactic ecosystems, economic models that demonstrated mutual benefit rather than exploitation. We invite dialogue, Elena concluded. But we will not be conquered. We will not be subjugated. We will not be ignored. Each word was a weapon. Each technical specification a potential bridge. Each mathematical model a demonstration of potential, both collaborative and destructive. The diplomatic chamber was more than a meeting space. It was a turning point in galactic history. Humanity had just changed the conversation, and they were just getting started. The galactic archives were more than a repository of information. They were a living testament to the collective knowledge of countless civilizations, a massive orbital complex that spanned multiple star systems, and now they were being fundamentally rewritten. Dr. Marcus Chen stood at the primary data integration chamber, watching as humanity's comprehensive report began to cascade through millennia of established galactic understanding. Around him, holographic displays tracked the information's propagation, not just its distribution but its impact, its interpretation, its fundamental restructuring of existing knowledge. Information penetration is at 87%, reported Lieutenant Kira Yoshida, her augmented eyes tracking multiple data streams simultaneously. We're seeing unprecedented levels of reanalysis across multiple scientific and diplomatic networks. This was more than a simple information update. This was a cosmic recalibration. The archives had always been dominated by older, more established civilizations. The Shinlar Collective, which had maintained galactic records for over 3,000 years, found their historical narratives being systematically challenged. The technological and strategic analyses humanity had presented weren't just new information. They were a fundamental reimagining of galactic power dynamics. Civilizations that had long considered themselves technologically superior were now reevaluating every assumption they had ever made. The comprehensive data package humanity had released contained more than just technical specifications. It was a complete deconstruction of existing galactic paradigms. Preliminary diplomatic response networks are showing complete systemic shock, Dr. Amir Khan announced. His voice carried a mixture of professional calculation and scientific excitement. The information spread was unprecedented. Each transmission carried multiple layers of analysis, technological capabilities, strategic methodologies, psychological profiles, adaptive potential, collaborative opportunity. Species that had previously been conquered by the Zornak found new hope. Those who had considered humanity a potential threat now saw a complex civilization offering a fundamentally different approach to galactic interaction. The Galactic Council chambers, a massive orbital complex that had been the center of interstellar diplomacy for millennia, was in complete disarray. Representatives from over 200 different civilizations were simultaneously analyzing, arguing, reassessing. We're detecting massive restructuring of existing diplomatic protocols, Kira reported. Multiple species are completely reorganizing their strategic assessments. Dr. Chen watched the holographic displays with a calculated calm. This was the result of generations of preparation. Not just military preparation, but a comprehensive approach to potential galactic interaction that had been developed over decades. The truly revolutionary aspect wasn't humanity's technological capabilities. It was their approach. Not conquest. Not submission. Collaborative potential on unprecedented terms. The data packages contained more than defensive specifications. They included potential collaborative research projects that could revolutionize entire fields of scientific understanding. Economic models that demonstrated mutual benefit. Technological innovations that could transform multiple galactic ecosystems. Information. Penetration is now at 94%, Lieutenant Yoshida announced. Entire fields of scientific understanding were being rewritten. The Shinlar Collective's historical archives, which had been considered the definitive galactic historical record, were being systematically challenged, analyzed, and in many cases, completely reconstructed. Species that had been considered technological backwaters were now being re-evaluated. Humanity had demonstrated that technological capability wasn't about age, but about adaptive potential, innovative thinking, and comprehensive strategic preparation. The galactic archives were experiencing a fundamental transformation, complete information integration estimated in 6 hours, Dr. Khan reported. In diplomatic centers across multiple star systems, representatives were discovering a fundamental truth about humanity. They were not a species to be conquered, not a potential resource to be exploited. They were a complex, adaptive civilization that had just changed the entire conversation. Marcus Chen allowed himself the slightest smile. The first move was complete, and humanity was just getting started. Epilogue. In the quiet moments after the cosmic recalibration, humanity looked to the stars, not with fear, not with aggression, but with a calculated, boundless potential.